Welcome to Appalachia Rising. It's our second podcast of this series, and we hope that you've enjoyed the first podcast and some of the stories that Jared Arnett talked about in that segment. We have with us today one of the founders of Bitsource, one of the companies that Jared talked about, and I'd like to introduce him to you. This is Rusty. Rusty, say hello. We got cameras all over the place, I guess. So tell us a little bit about Bitsource and what brought you to doing Bitsource.
Okay, sure. Well, thank you for having me. It's really an honor to be here and speak to you about this. Bitsource was really, as one of our developers says, motivation through starvation. You know, with the downturn of the coal economy, all these folks that my business partner and myself, Lynn Parrish, had worked alongside all of our careers, had lost their job.
Yeah.
And so many people were leaving the region, and we were just looking for something that would have an equivalent earning potential,
right,
that there was a market demand for and had a future. And that eventually, through some interactions with SOAR, we learned about software development. And so we sought that. We investigated, thought about it briefly, and just said a prayer and got an answer and took off down that road.
Jumped in, that's
Jumped
right.
in, yeah.
Now, you and I have talked quite a bit, so I'm going to back up in the story a little bit. I probably should have started here. You and Lynn Parrish have known each other for decades.
Oh, yeah.
And you all started together in the coal mining business, is that right?
Well, we have a company that we own called Jigsaw Enterprises.
Okay.
And it's engineering and excavation, and also mines coal and does some construction. So all about just land forming and site development, anything with the forming of the earth.
Right, moving dirt and stone and all those things.
Lots of different projects in the region that you'd be familiar with.
Okay.
And so we had worked, and of course we both come from a background in coal mining. Lynn in the management of mines and also in the coal sales side, and I come from the engineering and operations side.
Okay.
And so we had met in our interactions through the industry through the years, formed a friendship, and served together on another board and got to know each other. And then we formed a partnership in 2010.
Okay.
And so we'd been in business for a few years and had been looking for ways to diversify. And then the perfect storm came.
Right.
And so really the war on coal was a real thing. It's true. But it was also the confluence of events.
Right.
It was the perfect storm.
Right.
But the industry collapsed. So Jigsaw, although it's had a couple of name changes, was a business started by my father, and I think this might be our 44th or 45th year. And so it'd been around a long time, have employees there, has been with us over 30 years. Yeah. And so numerous people worked there their career and retired. And we lost 70% of our customer base, ceased to exist in 1 year.
Right, right.
And so, we were trying to transition Jigsaw to other markets and opportunities. And at the meantime, all these people kept coming to us. What do we do? What do we do? There are no jobs. I'm going to lose my home. And it really touched our hearts. And we were both motivated. And of course, SOAR came about, which is, we're just big supporters of SOAR. We see the value in regional collaboration and,
right,
and that they've agreed on the 7 SOAR focus areas. And so obviously, one of those focus areas is jobs and how we bring, opportunity here. And so the key thing when you look at it is that people have to have a good job or they can't stay. All the jobs that we found would have, a third to half the earning potential of the jobs these folks had lost. Well, that's a terrible adjustment for any person to have to make. And a lot of times not sustainable. So we found that there's earning potential equivalent to these mining jobs in tech. And so like I say, we just said a prayer and kicked off. We didn't know what we didn't know, but it was a labor of love.
So talk about the scope of the problem for just a minute, because I think that the more specific we are, the better this story really is. So Governor Patton and I have talked about the changes in the coal industry in the last 15 or 20 years. And the numbers that he uses, if I remember them correctly, are 4,500 coal miners in Pike County, and that was 15 or 20 years ago. And now there are around 400.
Yeah. But that can be, you got to really be careful in statistics, although that's a correct
That's just
number.
miners. I know that there's a whole ancillary business.
But what happens is so many of our miners now the mining jobs that are here now that weren't here even 4 years ago are in the metallurgical field, and so many of our workers are driving across the border into Virginia and West Virginia, where the metallurgical coal there's more abundantly. So here in Pike County, the majority of those 400 jobs would probably be in Feds Creek and Phelps along the border of West Virginia and Virginia. So Grundy, that area, that's where the metallurgical coal. When you come down here near Pikeville, you're more in the thermal coal. And so although there is a market for that, it's not what it was, because the power plants shutting down really dampened the demand of the thermal coal market. I say one of the saddest days in the history of the Big Sandy Valley is the day we blew up our power plant at Louisa. If you look historically in Pike County, we were electrified here just a little after Lexington and Louisville. They were electrified a little earlier than we were, but we had electricity here early on. And there were power plants in Hellier and Jenkins, over in Stone, various places around in the coal camps. And Pikeville had a small generating station here, and pretty quickly they were all formed into a grid through Van Leer, all the way from Van Leer up to Jenkins, one grid through Consolidation Coal. And so we got our electricity here in town from the coal companies. Eventually, over through Consolidation, the power plant moved down the river, and it ended up in Louisa, where there was enough water to make a sizable plant. And since we've had electricity, we've been self-sufficient here in this valley until 2 or 3 years ago when we blew our power plant down. We mined about 1 million tons of coal here a year. That plant made enough electricity to sustain the whole valley, and we mined it here with our people. We sent it just down the river a little bit. We converted it to electricity, and we consumed it here. So now that power plant runs on natural gas from, it's a smaller plant, so it won't meet the entire need of the valley, and it runs on gas from West Virginia. And then when they need more electricity, we import our electricity from Indiana. So,
from the Cincinnati area, right? Isn't that the plan?
And so the idea is that we're no longer energy self-sufficient here in the Big Sandy, which is a sad day for me as a mining engineer. But and those were jobs. Mining those 1 million tons of coal from here created jobs for a lot of people here. Now those jobs have gone away.
But even by Paul's estimate, that's about an 80% reduction in jobs, and that's probably conservative because of all the ancillary jobs that are related to that.
I think about it to the tax base. Is how I kind of look at it. So if a miner made 3 times the average income of the median income in the valley, which I think was what that number was at the time.
Give me a ballpark of what that was, because again, this speaks to scope.
90 to 110,000. You'll hear low number be 70, 125, but I say 90 to 110.
Mix of overtime and all that stuff
is the number, and then and I don't know what the median income is now, but at the time I think it was 27, 28,000, and maybe 32. I can't remember exactly, but it was about 3 times. And then that miner made about 5 ancillary jobs in truck drivers, people at the restaurants that feed them, the guy delivering the roof bolts, the guy at the Wayne Supply that was repairing the equipment, and so about 5 other people. So that one guy working was equivalent to 8 jobs to the tax base. So the gain or loss of a mining job is a really big impact or driver in this region. And so even now, I say, Lynn and I joke, we're probably the only pro-coal tech company in America. But because we just see the necessity of it to our economy and its people, and we're really all about what's best for the people here. So.
Well, and that leads us into Bitsource, because I think that the loss of those jobs, very conservatively, $70,000 a year, very conservatively, 110, 120, I think is the top number I've heard. Now you're trying to find an industry that can replace jobs in that category, and it's a small a small subset of industries.
It's a small, and that we can, so you have this disrupted workforce. One of, 3 things happen. That person leaves the region, and so you're taking somebody straight out of our tax base to in our economy, and exporting a person that's a taxpayer, working person, to another economy, another region. So that hurts us. Or they have to take disability, and that's not good. or they take a lower paying job. And so because those jobs just didn't exist here.
Right.
And so, that was part of the logic and what drove us into the necessity. So once again, motivation through starvation.
That's right, motivation through starvation.
Well said.
But that's I think that's a pattern that we see a lot in other parts of the country as well, where innovation follows a really serious disruption.
Yes.
I think of my own hometown. I grew up just outside of Flint, Michigan. I've told you
Yeah.
this before. And we had a different industry that was making $70,000 to $120,000 a year for most of the employees, and 100,000 people just gone
Yeah.
over the course of a year or two. And now they're re-innovating and doing some things themselves to try to change their future.
Yeah.
So this is one of the reasons I think Bitsource's story is such a powerful story that needs to be told and needs to be replicated.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about what your approach was to train these really high-tech skilled workers, these miners, and help them to learn the skills that they needed to enter the IT world.
Well, really, Lynn and I obviously don't come from software. I learned what small amount of coding I know personally in Fortran when you use punch cards.
Right.
Okay, so I guess I understand the logic behind it. So it's not mysterious to me like that. But we just started out just like you work any problem. You identify, you quantify, then you prioritize.
Yeah.
That's how they teach engineers to solve every problem. So what are the challenges? Let's quantify those. Let's work on this, then that, then that. So the first thing we had to do was to find someone that could train. And so a local guy here, Justin Hall, a graduate of this fine institution, had left here, and I'd been playing basketball with him at the Y 20-some years ago. And I remember he came around, shook our hands at the end of the game and said, "I'm leaving town. I'm taking a job as a coder." Well, I didn't, know even what that meant, really.
Well, 20 years ago, who knew what that meant?
And so he said, "I'm going to go, and I'm moving to Lexington, and I'm going to learn to code."
Right.
And so he did, and that just stuck with me.
Right.
So when we're related, but we didn't know each other. I mean, we knew each other, but not well.
Right.
And so I had my wife look him up on Facebook, because when Lynn and I said, "Well, who can we get to do this?" And I said, "Well, I remember that." And so he had posted something about training some kids how to code that day.
How about that?
Which is God's providence,
That's
in our world. And so Justin developed a curriculum, and then Peyton May moved back to the region and has a lot of expertise in technology, not necessarily programming, and a lot of other skills. And so and he came on board, and so the four of us worked collaboratively, and we worked with EKCIP, our local workforce board. And we think that we have probably the best workforce board in the country here. And so they helped us, and they found a profile of a software developer.
Okay.
And we tested our applicants against that profile.
Good.
And so we did that, and we found a lot of people here had aptitude.
How many applicants did you have in that first go?
Believe it or not, 950. We ran a radio ad, and we had to pull our radio ads. I mean, we were overwhelmed. So the very first thing we had to do was shut down and write a database to parse the applications. I mean, we just were overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so we shut down our website that we were accepting them on, and we started. And so that caused a couple of week delay just to get through the number of applicants in about a week.
Right.
And so because of the number of good applicants that we had and the volume of them, just from the region, we kind of pivoted and we said, "I'll tell you what, let's use this as an example of the region." And so our workforce is a cross section of the workforce, and which is really provide an indirect benefit to other people. So like Interblue and the folks that come here, they want to talk about the workforce because we've seen firsthand this. And so our folks are a cross section of the industry and the area. So they're from the different counties, and then some were underground miners, some were surface, and some worked in industry support.
Right.
So we were able to really get a lot of indirect value there. and we started, and so we trained, and really now, if you go down there, I mean, I was in there this week for the first time in a couple of weeks. I've been on the road a lot lately, and they're showing me things, and I'm going, wow, oh wow,
Yeah.
and so you get those wow moments when they show you things that you don't expect,
And you have, not you personally, but Bitsource has facilitated the instruction for how many gentlemen are working down there now?
Well, there's 10 developers.
10 developers, okay.
And then we've added around that. So,
Right.
And then we've offered the management to the company, out of our other businesses.
Okay.
So the management structure comes, from other holdings that we have, and so it's basically what we think of as operations are there, and now sales.
Yeah.
But so like HR and the risk management and accounting, all that stuff gets done elsewhere.
And I only know a couple of things that you've been working on. There's some apps that I know you've been working on. There's an augmented reality app that I know Lynn has talked to me about.
Yeah.
But the one that I think is the most interesting is the one that tells people where Narcan is. Am I getting that right?
Yeah. OD Save. And this is another example of two things that's very powerful. Is regional collaboration. So we learned about the need for an OD Save app in a SOAR-sponsored hackathon in Somerset with MIT, focused on 3 issues, I think obesity, diabetes, and opioids.
Right.
And so out of the hackathon, a person from the hospital here, two folks from Bitsource, a counselor and a pharmacist came up with, okay, let's build this app. And we had a working prototype of that app in less than a month.
Wow.
And now we revise it as we learn and as we see. But we actually presented at a huge conference in Dade County, Florida, 2 weeks ago.
Did you? Well, how was the response to that?
Oh, we're doing a pilot project here in Pike County with 22 fire departments.
Good.
And so it works. And matter of fact, it was pretty intense. They said I wasn't there, but down in Florida the other day at this conference at a big healthcare provider down there, they were on the stage, and one of the doctors came up and said, "Let's see if it'll work here." And he pushed it, and it responded. So sigh of relief. Always in tech, there's always a sigh of relief.
That's right.
So anyway,
So tell us a little bit about what it does, because
it's kind of like
I think
Uber for Narcan. Narcan just negates the effects of opioids.
Yeah. So if someone's in an overdose, they administer Narcan and they start breathing again.
And an overdose is like a stroke.
Right.
If you get to it soon enough, you survive it.
Right.
Okay. So it's that golden minute, and so basically you just relax so much you quit breathing.
Right.
So they have inhalers. There's different ways to do it, but primarily it's inhaler. You inject it into their mouth, and they breathe it, and they revive. It negates the opioid. And so you have to have responders. So one of the things, we built the technology when we realized, well, it doesn't do any good. You've got a demand over here. You got the demand side, but till you have the supply side, you don't have a complete product.
That's right.
And so we've been building the supply side. That's what the technology's been in the box for quite a while.
Right.
So that's what we're doing, is we're demonstrating, doing a pilot project. So once again, we're leading here in Appalachia.
I know.
In a national problem.
This is the kind of story that we want to highlight in this particular podcast, because there are some problems that are endemic all throughout the United States, but they have a focus here.
Yeah.
And we got creative people who can solve these problems.
So people here. Yeah.
We're just jumping off with this. Keep going. It's a great story.
So anyway, we're hopeful that will become our first successul offering to society.
Yeah. So the app, maybe I can describe it a little bit. You would have it on your phone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And,
yes.
And if somebody, you see somebody who's overdosing, you activate the app, and it will tell you where all the Narcan is around you, so that if it's across the street at somebody's house, you can go get it, or they can administer it.
So if there's a volunteer, because here, this is a rural problem.
Right.
So if you're in Phelps and you have to dispatch a ambulance from Pikeville, you're 45 minutes tops.
Yep.
Okay. But if there's a volunteer fireman that lives down the street, then he can come over, administer the drug, save your life, and then you can hopefully seek treatment.
That's right.
Okay? And obviously, you can't help a person get off drugs if they're dead.
That's true.
So, in the critical path, the first thing to do is keep them breathing. And as a person who's, and probably like most people, I've had very close family members addicted to opioids.
Right.
And I've seen them recover and go on to full and complete lives. And so while it seems hopeless when you're in the middle of it, there is hope.
Yeah.
And so that's why everyone at Bitsource is very passionate about this, because we all know those people.
Right.
And if we can just play a small part in saving one life, Bitsource is worth it.
Absolutely.
And so, and that's, we're a very socially conscious business. And so, that motivates everyone there.
Yeah.
And so, that's a product we're really proud of. Now, as far onto the augments, we're currently doing augments for the murals in town with the Main Street program.
Right.
It's a different technology, works differently, but another area of expertise that they've developed down there. And then doing some things in virtual reality. I mean, if you go down to the Coke building and put on their goggles, you can walk through the building and never leave your chair.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I saw some construction projects the last time I was there.
Yep.
That looked really interesting. You could walk through those.
We had a virtual reality project for the hospital to demonstrate a concept that they have over there, and it's really, it's realistic, and
Yeah.
so and those guys did that. We're working in dialogue flow, so just like if you noticed in the World Series, I'm a baseball fan, so if you noticed the World Series, they would say, "Hey Google,
Right.
tell us about Fenway Park." Well, we're doing a Appalachian dialect project to teach people that hopefully be some kiosk around
Right.
here at the campus, hopefully, that you'll be able to ask it Appalachian terms, and it will tell you what it means. So,
Oh, that'll be fascinating.
So when people come here, and we can, help us to reclaim and redefine what it means to be Appalachian.
Right, right.
So that's another part of our mission.
Very good. So talk about that a little bit, redefining and reclaiming what it means to be Appalachian. Because I think from our conversation the last time we were together, probably the most fascinating part for me was learning more about Appalachian culture.
Yeah.
And I know that you are at least an amateur historian,
Yeah.
maybe way past that.
No, I would say amateur would be a compliment.
But I know you love it.
I love it. I never confuse my passion for it with my amount of knowledge in it. I always say I'm self-taught, so you have to consider the source when I tell you anything.
Well, Abraham Lincoln was too, so there you have it.
Well, okay. Well, we were both tall, so I guess we have that in common. So, when I went away to UK and for school in engineering, I found myself changing the way I talked.
Right.
And it reminded me of all my cousins that moved to Flint, Michigan, and
Sure.
up the hillbilly highway to Ohio and Michigan to work during the last collapse of the coal industry,
Right.
the last out migration. And so that's just what you did when you left here. And I never felt good doing it. It
Right.
always made me feel less than, but I did it. Obviously, I've gotten over it. But when I had a child, my wife and I had a child, and I was older by then, and I think I was 38 when I had my first child, and our only child, and I was trying to think, what do I want my child to know? It's that point in your life where you reflect on who am I, what do I want this person to know,
Right.
And so just a little before that, I was at a tailgate at University of Virginia with a group of friends from all over the country, and we were tailgating and sitting around talking, and everyone there knew about where they were from. And I didn't know anything about where I was from.
Huh.
So that informed, I said, well, I'm going to teach her to be proud of where she's from.
Right.
Because my dad was really proud of this place.
Sure.
He loved this place. And I had that love. I always had that love of this place. But I was ignorant, and I felt less than, and that people, I was always apologizing for where I was from.
Right.
And I thought, I'm not going to raise a child that has that. And I don't want my child to change the way it talks. Because our dialect is always belittled. If you watch television every week, I saw it 2 times yesterday. In these politically correct times, a hillbilly is the only thing you can disparage and be accepted and really celebrated. And so it informs us whether we know it or not. I think this is just my thoughts on it. It did for me anyway. Is when it makes us feel not that we're less than, but that we think people from outside think that we're less than.
Right.
So we try to distance ourselves by talking different, so they won't judge us, prejudge us, and that's really why people do it. It's a mode of survival. It's a form of survival. And but if you're a kid and you're growing up and you're hearing, ignorant hillbilly, and you know you're a hillbilly, you either refuse to acknowledge you're a hillbilly, or you just withdraw from the world and we don't interact. So we have all these people here, I think, with all these amazing abilities that hide their light under a bushel.
Right.
And so and so from firsthand experience, it's anecdotal, but it's really impressed upon me. We offered 11 positions at Bitsource, and the 11th guy didn't come. And so when I called him, and he had all the same test scores, aptitudes as everyone else.
Right.
And he had a job making $9 an hour. He had lost his home, he'd lost both his automobiles, and he was working as an off-bearer in a sawmill for $9 an hour. And he was picking up scrap metal and digging ginseng to support his wife and kid.
Right.
And I said, why don't you come? Your job started today, and we started him out at $15 an hour.
Yeah.
And he said, man, I'm just a dumb old coal miner. I can't do that. I can't program computers. So Lynn and I really we both really like this guy. And so we both realized right then that, until you reimagine yourself, you're never going to change anything, because if you don't believe you can do it, you can't do it.
Right.
So we always say that, we have to do 3 things with a software person, a developer, is from Appalachia. Is first, and with some people it's more of a challenge than others, but first you have to get them to believe they can do it. So reimagination. Then you teach them computational thinking, how to be a problem solver. Coal miners know how to be problem solvers.
Oh, yeah.
They bring that.
Yeah.
And then you give them digital literacy skills. So.
And it's the last thing that people worry about so much.
Yeah.
And my experience with people in this region is they learn that as fast as anybody else.
It'll blow your mind how quickly they get up to speed on things. We just recently sent a developer to MIT. First time he'd ever flown, 50 years old.
Yeah.
And he goes up there and he excels.
Yep.
And so and he really was impressive. And how quickly they embrace and digest these skills.
So is the hardest thing getting people to reimagine themselves?
I think it's the biggest challenge we have in Appalachia.
Yeah,
I think that's why this is worthwhile.
Yeah.
I think it's the undercurrent that informs so much of what we do. And so I'm called to speak a lot around. It's amazing at the opportunities I've had to speak in different places. And I always say, hello, I'm Rusty Justice, and I'm an unapologetic hillbilly. I start every talk that way. And it's because I'm not apologizing for it anymore. I'm a hillbilly.
Yeah.
And if I was from Texas, or I was from New Orleans, or I was from Boston, they all have dialects that are distinct. And Alabama, I don't hear those folks apologizing for it. They're proud of it.
Yeah.
And we have an amazing culture here. And so many things are to be celebrated. And we need to get to doing that. And so that's part of our mission at Bitsource as well.
I think that's a great part of the mission. It's one of the things that when we talked about it, I was just blown away by the cultural awareness, cultural sensitivity, and just the need for people outside this region to understand what's really happening here, because it's so different from the stereotypes.
Yeah. And you will find it in places you'll least expect it. I mean, part of the great joy I have in my work at Jigsaw is traveling around the region.
Right.
You know, we do projects all over Appalachia and up in the hollers of, you know, all these different communities. And so I'm in a lot of the camps, and it's just amazing the people you meet and the things they're doing.
Right.
And they're everywhere.
So you just mentioned camps, and I'm going to pull you back to a conversation we had. We were driving along, it's the longest dirt highway in Kentucky, I think.
Dinky Road.
Dinky Road, that's right. And we dropped down into an old coal camp, and
Yeah.
you told me about a vision that you and Lynn have for that camp and for camps like that. Can you describe that?
Well, yeah, you know, the beauty of this tech is you can do it from anywhere.
Right.
Now, we're getting connected into the network is more of a challenge than we understood. But you know, we see that you could go back in these camps where there's population density still, and through the you know, Kentucky Wired and last mile projects. If we can get broadband to these areas, we can put economic opportunity back in these communities.
Yeah.
So it might be Bitsource, or it might be someone like Bitsource. You know, we say in our mission statement that, you know, we want to be the seed from which we grow a tech sector.
Right.
You know, if you go, I was recently in Boston, we've been in Silicon Valley this year, and you see the density. You know, tech density is key. So it's not that we want to see Bitsource be the only show in town. We want to see more Bitsources.
Right.
Because we think there's a workforce here capable of doing it, and we think that work could be done around the region and put opportunity back into these areas that have lost their purpose.
Right.
Because these towns mostly were built, you know, for an industry that no longer exists there. And so the infrastructure there, although it's a declined population, there's still population density, but what there is affordable cost of living, and with a little spit and polish, these were really the nicest places in the mountains to live.
Right.
You know, the camps were nicer than the county seats in most cases.
Right.
And so when I was a kid, for example, we went to Jenkins to, you know, do our best shopping, and some of the better doctors and things, you know, were in those areas. And so the infrastructure and all that's there. You can't recreate them all, but we could still repopulate some of these and have affordable cost of living. And I believe, you know, there's been a huge diaspora, you know, twice, I guess, about the time I was born and now here in you know, 2013, 14, and 15, where we've just had this huge out-migrations.
Right.
And I believe a lot of people would come home if we create opportunity. Right. I truly believe that with all my heart. I know so many young people that want to be here, that are so talented. We just need to create those jobs and opportunity, which is why, you know, UPIC is vitally important and to that effort.
Yep. Well, on that, I'm going to take a little break. It'll give us a chance to get a drink, and then we'll finish up.
You're listening to Appalachia Rising, presented by the University of Pikeville.
Welcome back to our guest today, Rusty Justice. Rusty, we're really glad you're here. We've just been talking about using tech as a sector to reinvent rural America. And of course, we're in Appalachia, so we're talking about that. But do you think this is a model that could be replicated across the center part of the country?
I do think so. You know, Lynn and I just got to participate in the Heartland Summit.
Okay.
Which are 10 states up the center of the country, and maybe 13. Don't hold me to the number, but the states up the center part of the country, the flyover part.
Right.
And held by the Walton Foundation down in Bentonville, Georgia, discussing you know, solutions that work in rural America.
Right.
Because as you see, obviously the country, there's a rural-urban divide.
There is.
I recently heard a guy talk about the division in America is between the placed and the placeless.
Lynn sent me that article, and I was just going to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a little bit.
You know, you take myself and a lot of people like me, I mean, take me out of Appalachia and I'm a fish out of water. You know, the mountains are in me.
Right.
and I love it. I'll never come back from Lexington. I don't play Mountain Parkway as I drive up, and I know when I get to mile marker 23, and I'm back in the mountains.
That's right.
And I travel a lot, and I love to travel, but there's no place like home, so I'm placed.
Right.
Now there are people that I know and love that can live anywhere and be happy, and they're placeless. And so we have a different paradigm of thought. We see the world through a different lens, and how we bridge that. And so many people that are in the positions of power and authority in the country are placeless.
Right.
So they see a global community, and it's all one place, all the same place, and it's not that way for me and a lot of people that think like me. And so my focus is, I also had a priest one time tell me to bloom where you're planted, and so obviously my roots are deep here, and I want to see generations to have the kind of life that I've had here. This has been the best place to live for me. I mean, I love it here, and I've had so much happiness and joy in this place, and so I think there's a lot of people. I travel a lot in rural America. And a lot of people out there that feel like me that aren't, they might be in rural Kansas, but they feel about their place the way I do. And so how do we find solutions? Technology is foundational. It's not the oyster and it's not the pearl. It's the grain of sand that makes the oyster make the pearl.
Right.
Okay? And so the ability to do technology here lets everyone leverage off of that ability. So, we had a guy from Virgie come in a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, was a block layer. And he had designed, really smart guy, one of those guys I'm telling you about. And he had designed a square that allowed you to lay out a house foundation with one person. So he could go up to the footers. He could use this tool that he had designed. He could strike off his lines, and he could start laying his block. And since then, so we just helped him with a simple website.
Right.
And he's got his invention, and he was marketing it, and he still is. And he's since invented other labor-saving devices, some of which we have helped him prototype down there.
Right. Sure.
And so he has leveraged off the fact that people that look and act and sound like him in his community, he can walk in, he can walk out, and he can do his thing. This is a really evolutionary step in our region because that's not existed here before.
Right.
And so, if people see this and they have an idea and they want some crazy people to talk to about it, hey, we want you to come there because that's what we're about. And and all businesses have tech in them. If you're a quilt maker, you need tech.
You do.
And how you connect markets into global markets is so important. So one of the things that are the opportunities that being involved at Bitsource has brought us is I'm getting to participate in a thing called the REAP program.
Okay.
It's through MIT's Sloan School of Business, their School of Entrepreneurism. And Jared Arnett, myself are on it, and with 6 other people from across the state of Kentucky. We represent the East. I occupy the seat of the entrepreneur, and he occupies the seat of, I think, the nonprofit.
Right.
And then there's a corporate person, a higher ed, a government person, and a statistician and a facilitator. And so the president of Center College, a person from Logan Aluminum, which is the largest steel mill, I think maybe 2/3 of all pop cans roll out of that aluminum.
Right.
And huge company. And so a team. And we're learning about how do you create the environment for businesses to grow. And so Kentucky is the first state to ever be allowed in this program. It's always been an international program. And really this opportunity was brought to our state because of relationships that SOAR and Bitsource had formed at MIT. Right. We got there, got recognized. So our state once again is leveraging off of connections made here in Appalachia.
That's right.
And so we're in this 2-year program. and it's with 8 other countries. And we're learning about what you have to do to create the environment that businesses can grow in. Because part of the problem in Appalachia is there's not enough buildings with people's names on them.
Right.
And what they find is that people tend to stay where they invent and start their business. So if we could have graduates from UPike start businesses in Appalachia, and some of them be wildly successful, that's how we can fundamentally change the dynamic.
Yeah, it is. Because when these ideas rise out of a region, they have a tendency to stay in the region.
Stay in that region.
Yeah, they do. And you and I have talked about this before. One of the, the major thing that we've produced in the last 100 years is coal.
Yeah.
And just by its very nature, you take it out and you burn it.
Yeah.
And so we have a medical school called the Coal Building, which
Yeah.
honors that history and tradition, but it's not the same as manufacturing something that becomes identified.
But
in
we
that same
led
way.
the world in that industry.
We did, absolutely. No, I'm not belittling that at all.
Oh, I know you're not.
Yeah, yeah.
I know that.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is we excelled in that industry,
Yeah.
and we had global markets. People here competed globally.
Yeah.
With tech, our businesses that we start through technology, if we figure this out,
Right.
we'll be able to compete in the global marketplace.
Exactly.
So there at the REAP program, and I wrote this down because I didn't want to mispronounce it, but there were 2 types of businesses.
Okay.
There were innovation-driven enterprises, and then there were small and medium enterprises.
Right.
Now, neither one is bad, but they're different.
Right.
So a small to medium enterprise could be a coffee shop, but it's something that serves a regional or local market. So they can get so big, and then the market constricts them.
Yeah, it just saturates it. Right.
An innovation-driven enterprise can compete in global markets. So Uber never invented anything.
No,
They
that's
didn't
true.
even invent the technology they
You're
use.
right, absolutely.
They just applied the technology to a different industry.
They did, yeah.
Or to an existing industry. And they totally disrupted it. And they built a business that's huge. And so we can do that here.
Absolutely.
We have so much untapped potential here. And we think that, Bitsource is one of those innovative, businesses. And so we're an innovative-driven enterprise that seeks to bring about fundamental change. And they have different growth curves. There's different things about them. And so that's part of, our dream, our vision.
So you're an engineer by training.
Yeah.
And Bitsource solves a problem that you recognized. You needed to replace jobs, and there were technological challenges that you thought you could manage. I know you travel a lot, and I know you know this area really well. What are some of those other challenges that you think entrepreneurs need to start thinking about so they can come up with new ideas?
Well, here regionally, locally, digital literacy is a huge problem. It is a wall
Right.
that we have to break. And so to the point that we brought on a digital literacy person just to educate people in the region about the possibilities and the challenges and the opportunities that exist.
Digital literacy means different things in different parts of the country. What does it mean here?
Well, here it means, from the simplest things, the technological skills, but the technological capabilities and the technological challenges and trade-offs.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, our small business community here, and trust me, I was part of this before I got knee-deep at Bitsource.
Right.
I mean, I went in on day one, Bitsource wanted its first customer, and I said, hire Jigsaw. Jigsaw needs a website.
Right.
So they did a discovery, and when they got done, they said, your website's going to cost you about $1 million.
That's huge.
Because I was illiterate.
Right.
So I had no idea what I was asking for.
Right.
I didn't understand the possibilities, the strategies, all those things. I was digitally illiterate. Now, I still can't code, but I'm not digitally illiterate. And I've learned that. Bitsource is 5 years old now. I've learned that in the last 5 years.
Right.
Okay, this is how. So now Jigsaw drives business, employing, and we're a company that moves the earth, and we drive business employing digital techniques. We've employed digital tools in our processes that have lowered our costs and
Right.
helped us to be competitive. And so now that we understand what's possible and what's, what's critical path, what the strategies for these things are, and we're being logical about it. So really, that's something that we've encountered. But we really had three challenges when we started, as we identified them. One was, can you teach a coal miner to code?
Right.
Can you do that? And we've checked that box. We convinced ourselves we have a workforce here. Then, as people that know nothing about tech, can we manage a tech company? That's been a bigger challenge than we realize. And I always say, if we had a pizza store and we're going to start baking pizzas, well, we can walk in another pizza store and smell pizza and see that it's round and you cut it in triangles.
Right.
Okay? The cheese goes on top. If you've never been in a tech company, we owned a tech company, we'd never been in one.
Right.
How do you price a product you've never built with a workforce that never built it before? Now, over time, we've built, so we're figuring out and we've been lucky that people have come alongside us and helped us to figure that out from the industry, because we've not tried to pretend to be something we weren't. And then the third is, can we win the respect of the marketplace?
Right.
Can Appalachia, with these negative perceptions, can people trust them, to be part of their supply chain, to offer services or goods here, and not be another offshoring opportunity? A lot of people come here looking for that, $10 an hour person,
Right.
which is not the job we want. If we wanted to have 300 $12 an hour employees, we'd have them in 6 months.
Right.
That wasn't what our objective was. Nothing, I'm not disparaging that. I'm just saying that wasn't our objective. Our objective was to replace those mining jobs.
Right.
So,
well, good. Yeah, I'm always fascinated by that level of commitment to place, and this gets back to the place and displaced comment. I think that as I read that article from Lynn, well, I don't remember who wrote it. Do you remember the author of the article?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I don't either. Lynn sent it to me, and I found it so fascinating I didn't even look to see who wrote it. That's terrible. But, as I look at that, I think I probably fit more in the displaced category than in the placeless category. Yeah, displaced is something else, isn't it? Yeah, the placeless category, because, I grew up in one place that I still think of as home, but I've moved an awful lot in my life.
Yeah.
And so just by virtue of that, I think it pushes me into that category. And yet I think I'm coming to feel very placed here because of the people that I get to know and the roots that we begin to put down.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long that takes. It might take a generation or two, but
it's just where you're committed to.
Yeah.
They say what's important to you. Look where your calendar and your money goes.
Yep.
And that's what's important to you.
Right. Right.
And so if you're staying here and you're investing here, then time or money,
right.
It's important to you.
Yep.
I
think we got both of those.
I think you got it. Yeah. And so and that's the thing is the people that will just dig in their heels, and that's why SOAR is so important.
Yeah.
It was a group of people getting together, saying we're going to put this pettiness aside here and no further.
Right.
If we don't make these changes now, we've lost this place.
Right. Right.
To opioids and it's going to we're going to confirm internally what people mostly already think externally. And that's why I'm such a supporter of SOAR. Regional collaboration, it's not about me or anybody else. It's about this place and its future.
That's right.
And how we impact and bring about fundamental change. Now here in Pikeville, as a person who likes history, I believe why is Pikeville different? I've given a lot of thought to that. And if you look historically, we have been blessed with enlightened leaders. Buried across this point, right over on that hillside right there, is John Deals.
Yes.
And he's educated by an African American. He did not suffer from prejudice.
Right.
And so he adopted Perry Klein. The legislation for colored schools were from a person from Pikeville.
That's right.
If you look historically, the most important woman of the Kentucky Historical Society was from Pikeville.
That's right.
We have a
what's
history.
her name? Remind me her Effie.
No, she is no. This is the woman that sponsored her.
Oh yeah.
Mary Elliott Flannery.
Mary Elliott Flannery. That's right.
And suffragette. And so Effie Waller-Smith,
Right.
obviously an African-American woman, and her dad was a businessman here.
Mm-hmm.
The reason Effie Waller was educated was her dad was allowed to succeed here on his own merit.
And she was the first published woman?
Yeah, first
Published-
African-American woman published in a national magazine.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Her poetry is still read on Martin Luther King Day all over the country.
It is.
And she lived up in Cloy Creek,
Mm-hmm.
and so we've had strong women influences throughout our history, not the stereotype you hear.
Right.
We have, although I'm sure it's not utopia, but we've had enlightened leaders here that have said, no, that's not right. And we've had this college. This college has been a beacon of enlightened thinking for generations. I read a lot about it as I go through, reading things. And these folks that come here and have educated people that have stayed. And so I think that's important. But you think of Mayor Hambly
Yeah.
and building the cut-through.
Yep.
There was no financial scandal around that,
That's right.
okay? And so, we don't have a flooding problem. That's helped.
So talk about the cut-through for just a minute, because I don't think people who are just listening to this
Okay.
would know what that is.
Well, our cut-through, which is a defining feature of our town, Pikeville is basically built in a horseshoe. It's a town with a mountain in the middle of it, I always tell everyone. And so it's built around the horseshoe, the perimeter of that little mountain, Peach Orchard Mountain. And the river came through here and it flooded. So I've ridden a boat from that hillside over to the bottom of the 99
That's
before,
right.
And so if you are a working person, it's part of the cycle of poverty in Appalachia. So if you're a person and you're a working person and a blue collar worker, and you lose your washer dryer and all your carpets and your couch and your bedroom suit every 15 or 20 years, you're always starting over.
That's right.
So you never get to get up. You're always getting knocked back down by nature. And so flooding is part of the cycle of poverty.
That's right.
Okay, and so in Pikeville, because of the cut through, we have broken that link in the cycle of poverty. And then you have this historic influence of all this enlightened leadership. Governor Patton,
Yes.
Walter May, but Kelly Day. Kelly Day was the mayor of Pikeville. He's how we got the breaks.
Right.
In 1938, we had the largest environmental gathering in the history of the state here in Pikeville. So all these folks from here, and so we've just been. I think God's just blessed us for that reason, and that
Right.
makes us a little different than the other towns in the region. But all the towns have those people. We've just been fortunate that we've had them generationally.
Right.
Generation after generation, we have those people
Yes.
that pass the torch. And so we stand on the shoulders of giants, in my opinion. And we're fortunate we have one right here. I mean, in Governor Patton, what he's done for Appalachia, I mean, we know, we understand,
do.
but the people of Appalachia know. And he was an engineer.
Yes, he was.
So, he recognized in the critical path what we needed was infrastructure and education.
That's right.
And that's what he did. And so anyway, and so that's part of what makes this place special.
I'm going to circle back and ask you to talk just a little bit more about the cut through. I
I'm
agree with
sorry.
everything you said.
I get on a
but
tangent.
I know, but it's okay. So talk about what they did
Okay,
to
the
stop
cut through.
flooding.
Okay, the cut through lasted about 20 years from start to finish. It was the largest earth-moving project at that time, except for the Panama Canal, and it was a flood project, and it was driven by the fact that Mayor Hambly knew Everett Dirksen, who was the head of Ways and Means at that time. If you go to, I think the Senate office building is called the Dirksen Office Building.
Right.
But when Mayor Hambly was in medical school, he decided he didn't require much sleep. And he decided he was going to learn more about human anatomy than any person. And so he'd stay up at night doing autopsies. And he told me this story himself, so I take this. This is one of the few things I can speak to authoritatively. So he said, I learned every blood vessel, every nerve, every indention on the bone, every meniscus, every piece of the human anatomy I knew. When Everett Dirksen And he said, I bragged about it a lot. And so when Everett Dirksen was a freshman senator, he came to Northwestern where Mayor Hamley was in medical school.
Right.
And wanted help with his first legislation with his name on it, which was embalming standards for funeral homes.
Okay.
And they said, you need to speak to Bill Hambley. He knows more about dead people than anyone. Just ask him.
Yep.
So as two young men on their way up,
Yeah.
they formed a friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember when there were 3 bridges into town here, and Walter was on the radio, there was a big announcement that Pikeville was now an All-American city.
Mm-hmm.
And the All-American City, there were these little shields that were on each bridge that said, welcome to Pikeville, All-American City. Who knew what that meant? I
Right.
certainly did. And it was a grant program that Lyndon Johnson started during the Great Society for urban decay.
Mm-hmm.
Pikeville was the smallest town in America to qualify in the All-American City. There were 400 cities. And there were 22 separate grants, and I think the most any town got was maybe St. Louis. They got 12. Pikeville got all 22 grants.
How about that?
And Doc would write the grant and drive it to Everett Dirksen's office in Washington, D.C., which was quite a drive,
Mm-hmm.
lay the grant on his desk, and Everett Dirksen would earmark it. So we were the beneficiary of early earmarks here.
Oh, yeah.
But what Doc did do was he didn't squander it.
Right.
The Model Cities Board, which was constituted to handle this money,
Mm-hmm.
saw that every penny of it went to what it was supposed to and not to line their pockets because we had enlightened leadership.
That's great.
And so I always say, Doc put up the tree and Paul hung the ornaments on it.
That's good.
And so, but because Mayor Hamley was interested in the well-being of future generations.
Right. And so when the time came for, was the last flood in 77?
Seven.
77. And then he just decided it was time to move the river out of Pikeville.
Yeah, yes, it was already underway.
Okay.
The work had started, but the work is not complete. I think the work started in 68 or 69 or
was it
something.
that
It just
early?
took
Okay.
20 years,
Yeah.
from start to finish, because there was phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 of the cut
Right.
through. Phase 1, I think, got the railroad. Phase 2 got the river. Phase 3 got the highway.
Okay.
And then after the highway was completed, the railroad was taken out. Well, the railroad went out early. Then the boulevard was built.
Right.
And I can remember when they dug up the railroad tracks, because there were, I think, 10 or 11 coal tipples
That's right.
right around through here. There was coal load out right at the bottom of the 99.
I've
there.
seen pictures of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my dad got his finger cut off right down the street here,
Really?
Yeah, on one of these tipples down here. So, what he did was just amazing.
Yeah.
And so, and then just like with Walter and his, I've heard that said that Walter would go to Lexington, and he was always drive back from Lexington. He would notice the number of ambulances going from Pikeville to Lexington, and he said, "How do I get those ambulances to
Right.
come this way? They're just hauling money that way."
That's right.
And so what he did was, that's profound. I mean, now we're the regional healthcare provider here because one guy saw a simple problem that needed fixed.
Right. It's an
And then
engineering path
It's
again,
an engineering
right?
path.
It is. Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
just identify it, quantify it, prioritize it, fix it.
Yep.
And so that's it.
About 6 months ago, I was in PMC's new cath lab over there. And I've been in cath labs in other
Okay.
cities. And I got to tell you, it's as good as anything I've seen anywhere in the United States. And some of that equipment is more recent than I've seen at some of the big medical centers.
Yeah.
So I'm telling you, if you got a heart problem, that's right over there.
Well,
I mean,
let's talk about something else. I brought a team from MIT and a team from Carnegie Mellon that I met and showed them the labs here in the optometry school. Mm-hmm. And these are folks that are used to looking at a lot of high tech.
They are.
And they were impressed with what they saw here.
well, I'm glad to hear that.
And so, we've got a lot of things. I heard Rakesh Sachdeva say the other day, Pikeville punches above its weight.
Yes, it does.
And I thought, well said. I'm gonna borrow that, because I mean, for a town of 7,500 people to have all the things that it has here, I never bring anyone to Pikeville. And I always try to get everyone to come here. If I meet them, I invite them.
That's right.
And if you can get them here when they leave, they're forever changed because they see that this place is special.
They do, yeah, and I couldn't agree more with that. That's a great place to end. So, Rusty, thanks so much. It's always good to have a chance to sit and talk with you.
Yes, sir.
We got to get in the truck and go for another drive.
We sure do.
All right, take care, my friend.
God bless you.
We'll see you. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this edition of Appalachia Rising. For more information on this episode or others, visit www.upike.edu/Appalachia Rising.